like to do is introduce somebody I've known for over 20 years, and as Mark alluded, there's, even in the DuPage area, there's things that we don't know about. First of all, we don't know about the fact that there's, some of us don't know that there are homeless veterans living in DuPage area, one of the most affluent counties here in the western suburbs, right? And that's why we've aligned this chapter with veterans. But there's a lot of other things, like Mark said, that our kids are having to deal with as they come to high school, even as they come to junior high. And I want to let Dave come up. He's going to speak to us about 5 minutes, and he's going to be sharing with us some things that are very personal. So I want you to take notes on this. I want you to listen very carefully. Dave has a great heart for people, and he's going to be sharing with us. Dave Libby, come on up and share, man. Thanks for speaking with us today. Appreciate it.
You guys know what this is? It's like the newest generation iPhone. And this is a pretty good tool. Guys who are technically savvy, they look at this and they say, wow, this is a good device. Right? And if I drop this in the toilet, right, that'd be kind of sad. Right? So I spend all the time trying to get a new device and then drop it in the toilet. It doesn't really accomplish the purpose, right? Right? So what's happening right now is you guys are looking for new potential for future enterprise. My personal opinion is that that's about a 20-year pursuit, and it starts when kids are about 10 years old.
Well, how old?
About 10 years old. Okay? And that's normal. That's normal in the history of mankind. We would have kids, right, farm next to their dads, and they would learn how to farm, and they would become farmers. We would have kids go to work next to their dads, and they would then learn how to do that, whatever that job is, and they would do whatever that job is. When you find kids, a lot of times the application of their lives is in reflection to what they see inside their dads. So how many of you have ever lived with a heroin addict? Anybody? Right. Anybody ever have any kind of interaction with a heroin addict? Right. When I grew up with a heroin addict. Right. Her name was Rose. She was a girl whose dad, I went with, my dad's a pastor. We went basically to the place where he was. And the thing that's impressed upon me, I was probably under 10. The thing that's impressed upon me is we'd go in, and he had a hole in his lung. Right around his throat here, so that he could smoke. Right? He was so addicted to cigarettes. So he was in the hospital down a dark alley, and he had a hole in his throat just so that he could smoke. Okay? So Rose is a heroin addict. We had Rose in Georgia. They were teenagers, 16 years old, and Rose is on the positive side of the statistics because Rose is living as a heroin addict. Now I saw Rose get married and get divorced, and the guy that she married was a Harley guy, and he rode up in our small town of 4,000 people right to the town with his Harley gang, and he got married at my dad's house. All right, scared everyone in town. It's like it was really kind of funny. So I saw her get married inside of our living room, right? And then she divorced the guy, wasn't able to maintain relationships. Right? But he would write love notes on the back of support checks. So he'd write these little notes, and they got back together. And then she couldn't handle the relationship later on. She's still using today. But Rose is alive. This year in DuPage County, there's 42 kids that have been buried because of heroin overdose in DuPage County this year. Okay. Now, what's happened in the heroin issue is that if you know anything about drug addiction, I went through drug addiction. Basically, I can look at people's eyes and can tell if they're on drugs or not. It's a police seminar. I would do that because of being involved with kids. You can tell because your pupil is basically an indication of how your chemistry inside your body works. So if you have a brief understanding of how your chemistry works, you have these things called synapses, right? And what happens is that right here at the synapse, chemicals are released. So there's a electrical magnetic charge that goes down your neurons. Here releases chemicals across the synapse, and it receives at the other side, and the message just keeps going down as a positive, negative electrical charge, and that stimulates your body. Your eyes see things, creates chemicals, it goes through your body, right? Now what happens inside of addiction, when you deal with addiction, is there's about a 4-step process, because everything, including the things that you see, creates a chemical response. The food that you eat creates a chemical response. When you're dealing with medications, it's concentrated on introducing a chemical that's going to change your chemical balance, right? So everybody has, right, a chemical balance, right? And you start out in this range that, let's say, is normal, right? Your balance is right there. When you have something that introduces a chemical that's not familiar to your body, right? It inflates it. Your body responds by decreasing that chemical, and then it balances out again. Right? When you introduce a drug, what happens is it takes this process, and at first the drug doesn't have that big of an effect. The drug has, you know, a marginal impact until it starts becoming something that makes an impact inside. That's when it starts becoming something that's pursued, right? So your body then responds by having the chemical there by creating an anti-reaction to it. Okay, so it depletes what it's producing inside. This is how addiction starts until you balance out again. At this point, now this is euphoria, and this is a depression. Okay, so your body then will increase to a euphoric status, right? Your body will then chemically react to create a depression. Well, now what's happening is your body's being told that you don't have to produce that chemical. And so that balance of where that chemical started now starts to move. Okay? And in the stage of addiction, what's called addiction, what happens is basically you're introducing it, you're getting up to maybe what was a norm, but your depression is moving a lot deeper. So now you're having to try to pursue that drug to get back to a norm or to get back to something that was even feeling good. The last stage is called, basically it's a death stage. And what happens is it's so low here, you're just taking the drug to get up to what was formerly normal. Now you're down into depression. Now the other thing that happens at that point, okay, is that at the synapse, these things right here, these things start to fry. And what's happening with heroin in this area is that the grade of heroin that's coming in right now, a lot of it has been introduced recently because of how technology of growth is so intense that it's frying out the synapse. And so that when people start to then use at young levels, they're already on a death cycle. Okay? They're already going to die. Okay? It's not even going to be a question, it's just going to be a matter of time. And the thing that starts them, right, the thing that starts them in that process going down that road is they start wanting to feel good about themselves, being an athlete, being an actor, being something that has a social reward, but they don't make the team, the next level of the team, whatever that competitive level is, and so then they look for something else to try to address that. It could be caffeine. They start taking caffeine. Pretty soon it's speed. Then next thing you know, now they're on a gateway into heroin addiction as a high school kid. And once they have 2 or 3 incidents with this great heroin, they're going to end up in the coroner's office.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Now that we know what the issue is, what do you think the solution is in brief?
10 years old.
Okay.
You got to look at, you got to say, most of the people, right? And again, most of the what I've seen here today is looking at what I would call a result, right? Doesn't deal a whole lot with the origins of how things start in business or how things start in human development.
Can we expand this more in our next segment at some point? Dave, thank you for letting us be aware of this. I really appreciate that. Personally, I don't think there was anybody that raised their hand. I don't know. I didn't look around. But that's a serious issue. You see, this group is so much more about than just making money. And yes, it is. It is so much more about networking. And that's really important. But understand at the DNA for life, right, is people and how they try and deal with things. And if they have hope, if they have an opportunity not to even start the cycle, is that the best way to approach it?
That's a good step.
That's a good step in the right direction. Maybe we can expand it more. Thank you so much for coming and speaking today, Dave. You know, you probably didn't expect that, but I'm glad you shared, and I'm glad that you were here. Next time, we are going to be focusing on another segment of the 530 grid. Next time, it's going to be May 21st. All right, we talked about marketing today. More, better, faster leads. More leads, better leads, stronger leads, and getting them faster. All right, next time we're talking about area 2, which is the pre-sales. Okay, how are we going to address you know, tracking those leads, implementing strategic strikes, improving pressure points. We're going to be talking about that next time, okay? So if this was a helpful time for you, let us know. Finish the rest of your 3x5 cards. If you have to leave, have a fantastic week. If you can stay, we're going to have a bonus session. Thank you for being here, and have a great week.